Welcome to the second edition of the Fort Lee podcast. I am your host, Jefferson Wolf. I am joined by Chief of Primary Care at Kenner Army Health Clinic, Dr. Taha Haque. Happy to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
And we're going to talk about the subject that's very prevalent. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's dealing with it in one way or another. We're going to talk about COVID for a little bit.
Absolutely.
And as the Chief of Primary Care, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of lessons learned from the vaccine that people have already been getting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, everyone's well aware, we started vaccinating. The whole effort kicked off at the start of this year. And, everyone was familiar with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. And I think there's a lot of lessons that have been learned. We have over, 100 million citizens that have been vaccinated now. There's a lot of lessons in safety and efficacy that we're learning. But some of the key points that I wanted to really emphasize is that the COVID vaccine is very effective, and it's effective in really reducing the risk of COVID-19, in particular severe illness among folks who do get fully vaccinated. And some statistics go so high as to say by 90% or more. So it really is encouraging that we've got this resource available to us that folks can get done, and it's so helpful to reduce some of that risk.
So when you started the vaccination process and all the vaccines here on Fort Lee back in January, right?
Mm-hmm, correct.
Is this better than you would have expected in terms of efficacy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we had started off, we were getting a lot of reports from the studies, the clinical studies that the FDA had looked at to, grant the emergency use authorization. But those are always in limited populations. However, now we have real-time data that only confirms what we knew in the clinical data that shows that the efficacy rate is so high in reducing your risk from COVID.
And this is off the charts for most initial launches of vaccines, right? Going back to smallpox and polio and things like that.
Right. I think we look at, as one of the things that we really emphasize with folks is even just clinically in the trials, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines having high success rates of 95, 96% efficacy. That's amazing for vaccine effectiveness.
The next thing up when it comes to vaccinations, once you've had your vaccine, you've got to start looking at getting a booster shot, right? So what's coming down the pipeline in terms of booster shots? What should people be expected to do?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing I'd like to explain is just the difference between a booster shot versus an additional dose. Right now, there's no the FDA and the CDC haven't come out and recommended a booster shot for folks. There's still a lot of data that needs to be filtered through. And it's important to understand that a booster shot is intended for folks as a supplemental vaccine to acknowledge the fact that in folks who have normal immunity, immunity can wane over time. And so the booster is intended to, boost your immune system for folks that may have that waning immunity. That's different than the additional the additional dose. That's really intended for folks who, from the start, had a weakened immune system, for folks who were immunocompromised. Those folks, the guidance has been made clear from the CDC. The recommendation is that they do receive their third dose of whatever vaccine the series that they received 6 months after their second shot. So it is important to understand that right now we don't have clear-cut guidance from the CDC for the booster shots, but we do have guidance from the CDC regarding the additional doses for your immunocompromised patients.
Now, for those folks that are immunocompromised and have to get a third shot, does it have to be the same? If they got Moderna twice, do they have to get Moderna a third time?
So for those who got let's say, for example, you got a Moderna vaccine, the recommendation would be that you get the same vaccine as your additional dose. So it's best to try and avoid mixing the vaccines.
Now, as we're talking about the different vaccines, Kenner started off giving only Moderna.
That's correct.
Since Pfizer has been approved, and do you guys have Pfizer now that it's approved?
So we do have Pfizer now. We're going to start giving Pfizer for our soldiers initially, and then depending upon the supply of the vaccine that we get in, we'll determine if we can open it up to our dependents,
So
some of our civilians.
Do you have both now?
We do.
And
Yes, sir.
can people choose, or is there a process?
So right now we're going to, for our service members where the vaccine has been mandated, we are going to go with the Pfizer vaccine. However, for family members or dependents who haven't received it, obviously they don't have a mandate. The choice will be theirs. It'll be more likely than not that just for logistical reasons, we'll have Moderna in the clinics to administer.
You mentioned the mandatory vaccine, the mandate that came out a week or two ago. Can you talk a little bit about what our soldiers should expect to see?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for everyone's awareness, the Secretary of Defense did mandate that all service members receive the COVID vaccine. So in light of that guidance, Kenner has established a ShotX that we're going to hold for all our permanent party soldiers here at Fort Lee. And we will try and get as many folks that have not received the vaccine into that clinic and vaccinated. Naturally, there's a lot of folks that have a lot of questions about the vaccine, and it's important that soldiers are aware of the risks, the benefits of the vaccine, and I would encourage them, if they have questions, to talk to their primary care provider so that they have a better understanding of what the vaccine is and some of the benefits of getting the vaccine, and maybe even debunk some of the myths out there about the vaccine.
Well, while we're there, let's talk about, do you have some myths that you'd like to talk about while we're here?
I do. I think, there are some things that we really often see or hear a lot of as we've been administering these vaccines, and I think it's important that folks really get information from validated resources. Anything that I've mentioned here will come from the CDC, because that really is our most trusted source. And I think, I wanted to share a few things that that the CDC acknowledges as being really circulating out in the community. Case in point, does the COVID-19 vaccine contain microchips? At this time, there's no evidence that there's any sort of microchips
Right.
in the vaccine. There's no large conspiracy theory or things of that sort that would have the microchip in it. But less from a conspiracy perspective, there are legitimate concerns that will it affect, especially from a lot of the female patients, will it affect my ability to get pregnant? And really, at this time, there's no evidence that it negatively impacts fertility. It's been shown to be safe in pregnancy, and so we are encouraging pregnant women to get vaccinated. So the other really common thing I also hear, will it alter my DNA? It's just not how the vaccine works, and I think a lot of times folks believe when they hear that RNA, mRNA kind of terminology, they think there's going to be some sort of manipulation that's happening at the genetic level, and that's just not how the vaccine works. The vaccine is just teaching our body how to identify the coronavirus itself so that it can then start to repel the actual virus if we ever do come in touch with it.
One of the things we hear about is it's new. Has it been tested on people enough? Do we really know what's in it? I think we know what's in it, right?
Right.
And it's been, talk a little bit about how different this is than another vaccine from years past, and how much more experience we have with it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think, it's important to understand that, these vaccines went through the same 3-step clinical phase trials that any other vaccine that's coming to market in America would go through. And it was deemed, safe by the FDA through those steps. And it's also really important to understand that there were some vaccines that didn't make it to market as they went through that same process. So I think for peace of mind for our folks out there that, it's gone through very rigorous, evaluation. Once it made it through to the emergency use authorization, like I had mentioned before, it's over 100 million individuals have received the vaccine, and the CDC and continues to gather safety data and efficacy data on these vaccines. And like I had mentioned, it just continuously shows the efficacy of the vaccine and the safety of the vaccine. So as time has progressed over the last 9 months since the vaccines really started being pushed heavily, we're seeing how safe it is and how efficacious it is.
When we're talking about safety, could you talk a little bit about the side effects and how often we see those.
Yeah, so I think it's a great point because we do see side effects from the vaccine, and I think that scares a lot of folks and hinders them from getting it. But what I can say, Moderna was one we very commonly administered here at Fort Lee, but even with Pfizer, pain at the site of the injection, that I can pretty much guarantee you'll have. And it's something that won't last for a very long time, probably about 24 hours. Outside of that, some patients will develop headaches. Some patients will develop body aches, like muscle aches. And for the majority of people, those symptoms will resolve in about 2 to 3 days. There is less common side effects that we see, some GI stuff, diarrhea, some upset stomach. But there's a common misconception that this vaccine, any of them, will give you COVID, and that's just simply not true. Because we're not giving you the live virus, right? So if you develop symptoms from it, a lot of times those symptoms can mimic flu-like symptoms, right? Symptoms that just are very common to viral illnesses, and people associate that with COVID, but that's not that is more a response that your body is mounting to the vaccine itself.
There's a lot of things that people are doing that may or may not be appropriate.
Sure.
Talking about taking ivermectin is a big one right
Sure.
now. There's a few others. Could you talk a little bit about that? Is there a cure for COVID once you have it?
No, and I think it's really important to understand, right? It's a virus, and like any virus, we don't have very good cures for virus. If you came down with influenza virus, right, just the common flu, we don't have a cure for that virus, right? We may give you Tamiflu, you may get the medication. All that's intended to do is reduce the duration of your symptoms, but it's not meant to cure you of the virus. So in general, in medicine, we don't have very good cures of viruses. Oftentimes people try to draw similarities between viruses and bacteria, where we have, in bacteria, I can give you an antibiotic, I can see the resolution in your symptoms, or potentially a visible infection. With viruses, it just doesn't work the same way, for the most part.
So we definitely are talking an ounce of prevention in terms of being vaccinated is worth a pound of
Right,
cure.
absolutely. And I think, anybody that's been, we saw it in the early days of COVID, the bleach cures, and, ivermectin is a great point of that too. I would highly encourage anybody who's considering engaging in any of those sorts of things. You're safer taking the vaccine than you are taking those medications, and that's why, again, if you're hesitant to take the vaccine but you're eager to do the ivermectin, I would really encourage you to have a discussion with your physician or provider.
Another thing that's been in the news lately is the Delta variant. Could you talk a little bit about what the Delta variant is and how effective the vaccination is against that?
Yeah, and I think that's really important, especially as we are coming into the fall season. Just recently, Johns Hopkins, where we're collecting a lot of data about vaccine infection rates, indicated that we've seen a huge spike over the Labor Day weekend in new cases. A lot of that is being driven by the Delta variant. And so to give a very brief overview of what variants are, it's just mutations over a virus, right? The virus is a living thing. Coronavirus is a living thing, and it adapts, right? It's about survival. It's about adapting. And so the Delta variant in particular is a specific mutation to coronavirus. And what we know about the Delta variant is that one, it's extremely contagious. It causes more infections, and it spreads much faster. Initially, it was seen very aggressively in India, and as it sort of started to spread across the globe, we started learning more about it, and that's one of the key things that we took away from it, was that it is so aggressive and infectious. But we do know there is some initial data that's also suggesting that the Delta variant might cause more severe illness than other variants, especially in the unvaccinated groups, and which is why it's so important for our unvaccinated folks to really consider getting vaccinated and get vaccinated, because they have a higher risk of catching coronavirus and also suffering more serious illness from the virus.
With the current vaccines, how effective have they been shown to be against the Delta variant?
So it's been shown to be very effective. I can't give you an exact number. I think the studies are still happening that are going to try and show us the efficacy of it. However, we do know there have been initial studies that show effectiveness against or protection against Delta variant upwards of 90% for Moderna and Pfizer. So, however, no vaccine is perfect, right? We fully recognize that if you're, in that 10%, you can still get breakthrough cases, and we are seeing that. We are seeing people who are fully vaccinated that are still getting COVID. But what's interesting, what we're seeing in that population of vaccinated individuals who are getting the Delta variant, that they have less severe symptoms as compared to the unvaccinated. And I think that's really what's important. So if I had to sell it to you, I'm telling you, there's a really bad bug out there, right? The Delta variant. Right. I don't have a cure for it, but I've got something that could potentially reduce how bad it's going to be if you catch it, and that's the vaccination. And if you don't go with that, then the risk is much, much higher for a bad outcome.
So let's talk about kids. School's just getting underway all over this area. At what age are kids eligible for the vaccine?
Yeah, so Pfizer has been approved by the FDA for 16 and older. There's still currently an emergency use authorization for Pfizer in ages 12 to 15.
So theoretically, 12 and up can get it.
Correct, right, absolutely.
16 and up is sanctioned or whatever.
Absolutely, right. So it's been fully approved by the FDA for 16 and older. 12 to 15 is still approved under the emergency use authorization. And that's just for Pfizer. Moderna and the Johnson and Johnson vaccine are still under emergency use authorization for 18 and older.
Okay.
So we're waiting to see, I think in the next month or two, they're expecting a decision to be made on Moderna in the pediatric population.
What would you recommend to parents who are seeing their kids go off to school and being in close quarters, indoors with a lot of other kids who may or may not be infected?
Yeah, I think everything I would always underline with whether you're vaccinated or not is we still have to stick to our basics, all right? The basics are still hand hygiene, social distancing, wearing a mask. So as parents, I would highly encourage, following the regulations of the school that your child attends. And a lot of schools are following the CDC guidelines, especially in our local area, which is maintaining 6-foot distancing. Any child 2 and older should be wearing a mask. And they're doing rigorous hand hygiene. So, the schools are trying to maintain that safety. But the other piece to it, things that parents, but really anybody who comes in encounter with children or school-age children that are not eligible for the vaccine is to get vaccinated, right? We should really be encouraging our teachers, the folks that are working at the schools that are coming in contact with our younger population that's not eligible for vaccine. We really should be encouraging those folks to get vaccinated.
Now, I have a daughter who's almost 14, and she's vaccinated. How worried should I be that she could go to school wearing her mask, vaccinated, and come home and bring COVID to my 8-year-old who is not vaccinated yet?
That's a tough question. I mean, as a parent, I would tell you I'd be very concerned, right? As a parent, I have young kids and both are not eligible to even receive the vaccine, but they attend a school where kids are. And I think I would say we always go back to the basics. We should be encouraging, you should be encouraging your daughter, as best you can maintain social distancing, as best you can maintain that hand hygiene. I can't foot stomp that enough. I think what we saw as the vaccine effort really started taking underway, things started to get lax. But then we saw the spike of the Delta variant. And I think it's so important that we remind ourselves that there's still a transmission risk to this. There's still concerns of, your 14-year-old potentially could transmit this to your 8-year-old. And it's very important that both are adhering as best as possible to what the CDC guidelines are.
So more or less, we have to respect the disease. We have to realize it is a disease. We've got to respect it, and we've got to take precautions.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's great.
Prevention is key.
Probably a great place to end. Prevention is key. If people have questions, where is a resource that is accurate and can be trusted that they can go to at home to look at if they can't talk to their primary care manager?
I would really encourage folks to look at Kenner Army Health Clinic's website and Facebook page. We try and keep updated information on there, and I think that's a very reliable and trustworthy resource.
And the Facebook page is kenner.fortlee, and that's Kenner.ftlee, and Fort Lee is all one word. So if we were to spell that out, it's capital KENNER.FTLEE. So that's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything that we didn't cover that maybe we should talk about, or some message you'd like the folks to have out around the area?
I would just encourage folks to ask the questions, but make sure we're getting information from reliable and trustworthy resources. The last thing we'd want to see is somebody get hurt because of the wrong information.
Right, very good. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
That was Dr. Taha Haque, the Chief of Primary Care at Kenner Army Health Clinic. Great to have you with us today, and we'll be right back after this brief moment. Welcome back to the Fort Lee Podcast. I am joined now by Brigadier General David S. Doyle, the Commanding General of JRTC in Fort Polk. Thank you for coming to see us today, sir.
Oh, it's great to be here at Fort Lee. I'm glad to be here.
So, since we're not talking to someone from Fort Lee, the obligatory question is, why are you here? What are you doing here at Fort Lee for the next couple days?
Well, thanks. Hey, it's wonderful to be able to travel around the Army and see different things, but my purpose here is really to encourage folks to look at our combat training centers, to understand what the role is of Joint Readiness Training Center, the National Training Center, and then to talk to them a little bit about the professional and personal opportunities that are available at Fort Polk should they ever choose to become assigned there, and then really to talk to some of the audiences that I'll get a chance to meet about sustainment and the role of the sustainment warfighting function in large-scale combat operations.
So who are you here to talk to?
Well, I'm going to get a chance to talk to some Basic Officer Leader Course students, some Captain's Career Course students, and my Command Sergeant Major, Command Sergeant Mike Henry, is going to speak with some senior NCOs at a couple of their courses and some Sergeants Major and talk to them about some of the same material.
So that's the material, kind of reflected toward officers and toward NCOs.
That's right. We want to make sure that everybody understands if you come to serve at JRTC in Fort Polk, we've got perfect and really useful career paths for officers, non-commissioned officers, soldiers. It's a really interesting place to be. We've got an eclectic group of units that serve there, and we do a number of different styles of mission.
How does going to JRTC or a CTC position enhance somebody's career, whether it's officer or NCO?
Well, anybody that gets the opportunity to serve at a combat training center is going to practice the warfighting skills necessary to make them great at any job they do. So if you think about it, you go to the field and you practice on some of the things that you need to do within your professional area of expertise. If you come to Joint Readiness Training Center, you get to go do that and watch other people do it. And while they're doing it, you're actually learning from them. So with repetitions and rotations, you become better and better at your trade craft. So when you go to your follow-on assignment, you're highly sought after. You'll be somebody that can pull from the experience of others to say, listen, I've got some good techniques. I've seen this done before. Or, hey, wait, I think we should try something different because I've seen this not work and here's why.
So somebody serving at JRTC is likely to move on from there and be in a good promotion status and be in good status to be able to get a follow-on assignment. Is that correct?
That's very accurate. When you look at our promotion rates, especially with our senior NCOs, Sergeant's First Class to Master Sergeant, we outpace the Army's promotion rate by more than 15%. When you talk about Staff Sergeants to Sergeant First Class, we outpace the Army by 20%. So our NCOs are being selected at higher rates than across the force because the Army recognizes the competency that they gain while serving as an observer, controller, trainer.
Sir, in recent years, Fort Polk has had a lot of improvements to quality of life. That's been one of your projects as the commanding general there. Could you talk a little bit about what's going on at Fort Polk and how the quality of life there is being improved?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that's been ongoing for several years. The previous commanding general received word that Fort Polk was going to become one of the Army's 4 quality of life installations. Fort Hood is one of them, Fort Wainwright, Alaska, Fort Irwin, California, and Fort Polk there in Louisiana. As a result, we've been funded at a higher rate than any other installation in the Army for some of our infrastructure. We've been doing barracks renovations and motor pool improvements. We've been working on our road structure. But more importantly, it ties to how we treat our families. So we have great opportunities now, thanks to some additional funding for spouse employment. We have a designated representative who helps us ensure that if a spouse wants to work locally, regionally, or nationally, we can connect them with the job opportunities that most fit their talents. We've been able to spend money on our education program for soldiers, spouses, and the children that attend the schools in Vernon Parish. Vernon Parish is where Fort Polk resides. We have the #4 school system in the entire DoD for math, science, and reading,
Wow.
which is something people don't know about, and it's been a relatively new development. We also have an enhanced morale, welfare, and recreation activity schedule because there is less to do in the surrounding area off the installation. We go ahead and complement that with an extra amount of spending so that there's activities for family members, for single soldiers, and for families. And then lastly, we've been working very diligently to improve the quality of our housing. The on-post housing has been a main thrust. Almost 60% of our population lives on the installation as opposed to off, which is a little bit different ratio than you'd find in other installations.
So you have this great operation, great training opportunities for people, great career opportunities for people. Here at Fort Lee, we're very concerned with sustainment and logistics, transportation, quartermaster. How do those people play into what goes on at JRTC?
Well, our focus in the combat training centers is to prepare for large-scale combat operations. We recognize that the Army's not going to go to counterinsurgency missions exclusively, not going to conduct only counterterrorism missions, but we may be called upon to fight against a peer competitor and have to use all of our systems and tools. And in order to make any of those systems and tools effective, they've got to have a sustainment tail. They've got to have the requisite parts, the maintenance. They've got to have individuals that can deliver things on time. And so our sustainment warfighting individuals do incredible work to keep the machines rolling, to keep the apparatus running. And they get put under a lot of stress by serving at JRTC in Fort Polk because they're trying to ensure that a unit, when it arrives for its rotation, its training cycle, understands the very best techniques that are out there. And so it's professionally rewarding to be part of that process because we don't think it's going to be about tiny units. We think it's going to be about scale and speed. When you talk about the sustainment warfighting function, they're exceptionally well suited to ensure that we can accomplish things at scale and speed.
So if a unit comes to JRTC and is going to be in the box and it is a sustainment unit, what can they expect to learn and do?
Well, what they can expect to do is enhance the warfighting capability of the entire organization. So for example, we employ fires at an incredible rate during a rotation. We have to shoot artillery, we have to shoot mortars, and they consume incredible amounts of ammunition. And so that ammunition has to be sorted back at the location where it's stored. It then has to be paired with its fuses. It then has to be inspected. It then has to be delivered, and then it has to be serviced once it's been put back into storage. So just that one group of ammunition specialists is going to get a full workout for the entire tenure of the rotation. And that doesn't even account for the transportation piece. It doesn't account for the heavy equipment operators that have to be involved to move those supplies back and forth. So each of the components of the sustainment warfighting function get a realistic workout as opposed to just talking about it or doing it for a platoon or a company. They're doing it for 6,000 people in the box. I mean, just think about feeding 6,000 people at one time.
Right, now you mentioned platoon or company, and that's kind of a good segue. As a senior leader in the Army, you're going to talk to some of these young leaders, and the Sergeant Major is going to go talk to some NCOs. What is your message in terms of leadership for the young officers and for the NCOs?
Well, what I've found as we've watched these rotations and we've watched units come in, the successful units, the best units are well led, not a surprise, and they deal with adversity and challenges without becoming overly emotional. So the individuals who can kind of display composure, can react to the changing requirements, because inevitably a maneuver person is going to ask for something different tomorrow than they did yesterday. And so for their ability to be calm under pressure, that lends itself to a lot of great outcomes. What you see is units that are able to cope with those struggles can make better judgments on how to support the warfighter and how to be part of that team. Units that are also able to anticipate and kind of look forward are more successful. So for those leaders that are going to be part of my audience today, I would encourage them to be poised, composed, and really do their very best to anticipate requirements so they can be delivering answers before even the question's asked.
Now, building on that just a little bit, going away from the audience that you're talking about today, but what their next step might be, what's the difference between being a senior leader and being a junior leader, or is there a difference?
Well, I think, the scope increases as you become more senior and your leadership style has to change. And so where you can be very effective as a direct leader at a junior rank and you can solve problems by your personal presence, it becomes a lot more challenging the more senior you get. When you're a senior non-commissioned officer, you have to lead through others. You have to influence them to carry out the commander's intent. When you're a more senior officer, you have to lead through sometimes policy or written guidance, and you have to lead through other individuals who ensure that what you're trying to accomplish stays aligned. So that degree of influence is the big discriminator. You can't do it all just by your personal presence and you solving the problem for your team.
From your command experiences, what expectations did you have for captains, lieutenants, junior leaders under your command?
Well, at each location I served, I was surrounded by phenomenal sustainers. I mean, the people that I had the opportunity to work with in the 82nd Airborne Division or 3rd Ranger Battalion or 10th Mountain Division were accomplished. They had a lot of experience. And so they were able to solve problems because they'd seen some of the issues that we're confronting in the past. The problems are changing now, though. So we're not in a period of sustained deployments where we go to a base and we run supplies or we run sustainment operations from very fixed sites. There has to be a lot more initiative by our sustainers, both from our enlisted and our officers. So I think what I've seen, that degree of professional competence is built here in the schoolhouse, and then it has to be refined through practice. And so for the next generation, what I hope they are able to do is find those fantastic training opportunities or develop training opportunities to put their organizations through crucible experiences, put them under stress, put them under a lot of difficulty so that when they go to a new environment that no one has anticipated or it's different than what they had thought they were going to encounter, they don't get completely overwhelmed. And so I think the next generation of leaders has a daunting task ahead of them, but it's one we can do some preparation for now.
We talked about leadership and what makes a great leader. Could you talk a little bit about somebody that inspires you or somebody that you think leaders should study?
Well, one example would be General Matthew Bunker Ridgway. He served as the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, 18th Airborne Corps, but most importantly, he served as the commander of the 8th Army during the conflict in Korea. And he came in at a time of great adversity when U.S. forces and NATO forces were almost being repelled off the peninsula. And he turned the organization around. And he did it with leadership and presence and that calm demeanor that I mentioned earlier. A lot of what he did was instilling not just bravery, but the systems that enabled the organization to run. He knew that if a soldier didn't have warm clothing in Korea, he wasn't going to be able to fight in the wintertime. He knew that if a soldier didn't have the right amount of ammunition, he wasn't going to be able to fight the enemy. And so not only did he inspire people with his presence and with his charisma, he ensured that his organization could run effectively, could supply his soldiers, and therefore it turned that organization around. It became one of the most lethal fighting forces in American history.
Very good, sir. Do you have anything to maybe wrap up on, anything we didn't talk about, or do you have a final message for the people at Fort Lee, the soldiers and civilians and families here at Fort Lee?
Well, I'd just like to let everybody know I'm really glad that I get a chance to come here. This mission, the way that our Army trains for sustainment with our Quartermaster Corps, Transportation Corps, with all of our ordnance personnel, it's the backbone of the Army. It's the thing that makes everything run. You can't jump out of an airplane unless you have a rigger. You can't, supply a vehicle with fuel unless you have a fueler, and you're definitely not going to eat unless you got a great cook. So what happens on this installation matters to the rest of the Army, and it's a great privilege to join you here.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome back to this third segment of the Fort Lee podcast. We are joined once again by Megan Green, the marketing manager for the Fort Lee MWR. Folks, how are you doing today?
Good, Jefferson. Thanks for having me.
Oh, great. It's always great to have you back and know what exciting things are coming up for people to do across Fort Lee. Now, the first question I'll start off with, this is kind of off our script, but Who is eligible to come to MWR things, just so we lay that out clearly?
It kind of depends on what the program is, but the general rule is that they have to be DoD ID card holders.
Okay, cool, that's good to know to start off with. So if you are a DoD ID card holder and you can get on base, here are some of the things that you can participate in. So the first thing I have on the list here is the youth center is going to be reopening.
Yes, we're really excited. On September 7th, we reopened the youth center. It opened, we did a little grand opening celebration from 2 to 6 p.m. And the youth center is there to offer after-school programming for any DoD-connected youth ages 11 to 18. We have been closed for a while due to COVID, so we're really happy to have the kids come back in.
What kind of stuff can they do when they come there?
Oh, they can do fitness, life skills. We teach leadership classes. And it's a safe and secure environment where they can have fun while interacting with their peers.
Okay, and where's it located?
It's located right off Siskiyou Boulevard.
Oh, okay, good. So everybody can, easy to get to. Easy.
Yep, right near a lot of housing, so people can easily walk there as well.
Okay, cool. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the season opener for the Lee Playhouse. What's going on there?
Yep, so we're really excited to open this season. Again, we've been closed for a little while, but this season we're starting off with Neil Simon's penned musical, They're Playing Our Song. It'll be showing now through September 19th, and you can go to our website, lee.armymwr.com, for all the ticket information. And this will be the first play of our full lineup season for 2021 and 2022.
Well, that's cool. Last year, did you have a whole bunch of plays, or did they all get canceled from COVID?
Unfortunately, they all got canceled because of COVID, so we're really excited to open up again.
So this is the first one in more than a year then?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So we encourage people to go out and take a look at that. Where do you get tickets? Can you buy them online, or do you have to go to the box office?
You can call or you can go to the box office, either way, and all that information is on our website.
Okay, cool. Now, one thing that everybody is interested in, outdoor recreation, there's been plenty going on, especially as the fall comes along, the weather's not going to be so hot. People have a chance to get out and do stuff. Tell us what's coming up exciting for the outdoor recreation folks.
So one of our most popular events is kayaking on the Appomattox. So we'll do that on September 15th. But you're going to want to make sure you call Outdoor Rec beforehand to sign up because they do sell out quite often.
Now that happens very close to Fort Lee, right?
Yep, it's right in Roslyn Landing, right on the Appomattox.
Right.
And we supply everything for you, so we make it easy. We take the kayaks for you, everything you're going to need we have for you.
You just show up with whatever swimming clothes you want to wear and go.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds like a cool event. And you also have paintball.
We do. So we have paintball once a month. We do open paintball. So this month it'll be September 18th. The great news is we've had such great response to paintball the past few months. We're extending the season, and so we'll offer it in October and November as well.
Oh, wow. Where did the paintball take place?
Right next door to Outdoor Recreation. We have built our own. Mm-hmm.
That's kind of cool. How long does the session last? I mean, if you sign up for it.
You can go out there as often as you want. So you just pay a base price, and then if you decide to add extra rounds to it, you just pay a little more while you're there.
That's cool. Okay. Next up on the list, we have youth sports coming back this fall.
Yeah, so we've had youth sports going on right now, which we're really excited about, but we're already thinking to the next season. So in January, we'll start basketball and cheerleading, but to do that, we need coaches. So right now, we're asking for volunteer coaches to come out who might be interested in that basketball or cheerleading coaching. There's you get parent points, and then sometimes there's discounts on having your kids participate, so it's definitely a great thing to participate in.
And this, again, back to the FMWR website, right?
Yep, absolutely. And even if basketball and cheerleading might not be your thing, we have sports throughout the year. We are always recruiting coaches. Sometimes the process can take 3 to 5 weeks to get approval, so we encourage everyone to start early.
And just to satisfy my curiosity, where do they play basketball for the youth, and where do they do the cheerleading?
I think right now that's a little bit up in the air because we're moving some things around due to our fitness centers, but we'll be sure to announce it before the season.
That'll certainly be on the FMWR website.
Absolutely.
Still need the coaches. 24/7 Fitness Center.
Yeah, so we're real excited about this initiative. It's currently at Clark Fitness Center, so it allows you to register to have access 24/7 to a fitness center, which has been a real need here on Fort Lee that we've heard from our customers. It is currently at Clark Fitness Center, which is our vaccinated fitness center. So even if you've registered before, we're asking you to go in and re-register along with your proof of vaccination.
And that lets you come in any time of day or night. And
Yep.
What do you do, swipe your ID card?
Yep, you use your CAC entrance.
Oh, that's easy. How successful has it been so far? Have you had a lot of people there in the middle of the night?
We haven't had too much just because we've been moving some things around with fitness centers due to the vaccination requirement. So now we're excited to really get the program up and running.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully people will take advantage of that. And now, in honor of September 11th, we have the Run for the Fallen coming up, or in conjunction with September 11th.
Absolutely. It's definitely in conjunction this year. So this is our 10th anniversary of Run for the Fallen, as well as the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So it kind of all came together on the Saturday for us to really honor our fallen service members. So registration will start at 7 o'clock on September 11th. You do not need to pre-register. It's not a requirement. You can if you'd like. We're giving you a couple options. You can do it in person or you can do it virtually, and all of those details are on our website and our Facebook page. We will start off with a ceremony. We have a great honored speaker that is coming, retired Colonel Patterson, who is a familiar face here at Fort Lee, so we're very excited and honored to have her as our guest speaker. We will be doing the ceremony in Williams Stadium. Masks will be required for that portion of Run for the Fallen, and then it'll be a 1 mile or a 5K route outside of the stadium.
Do you run or walk both, or do you run the 5K and walk the 1 mile?
It's up to you. You can run, walk, however you want to do it in honor, that's fine. We do kind of track some of the miles, just so we can tally what we do at the end.
Okay, are masks required once you start walking?
No.
Okay, just for the ceremony
Yep.
when everybody's...
Exactly. During the ceremony and when you're not able to socially distance.
And is that open to more than just the ID card holders, or is that you have to be able to get in the gate to participate?
You do have to be able to get in the gate. People are able to try to register as a guest, so through the visitor center, but that has to be done prior with enough time.
Okay, so if somebody wants to bring somebody with them or whatever, they can, but you got to go through the normal procedure.
Yep, normal procedures will be in effect.
Okay, cool, that's great. I think that's all we have on our list. There is one other thing I wanted to ask you about, though. I know last time we talked, the FMWR folks were hiring, looking for fill a lot of jobs. How is the hiring process going, and do you have anything still open?
Sure. We've been excited to bring a lot of new team members on board, but we're definitely still looking for more. So we are looking in areas of recreation aides, childcare, laborers at our golf course, you name it, we've got it still open and available. We'll be announcing a hiring expo in the next 2 weeks that we're actually going to be holding off the installation, just to make it easier for potential participants to come and see what employment opportunities there are.
And the people that are interested, they can go to USA Jobs, right?
Yep, go to usajobs.gov, search keyword NAF, N-A-F, and then select your location as Fort Lee, and all of our jobs will come up.
That's great. Okay, well, if anybody needs a job, take a look for that. Well, thank you, Megan, very much for being with us again today, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon again on the next podcast.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.